Thanks for that, Latavia. It's time for our Legal Insider segment with our partners at the Mike Murphy Law Group. And this time we're talking slips and falls. And here to answer those questions for us is Aidan Murphy, a managing partner. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for getting up bright and early for us. All right, so we've got plenty of snow, of course, this winter, which means melts turn into ice. So let's say someone slipped and fell and broke their ribs. They're off for 4 weeks without pay. What can they do?
So I guess the usually typical lawyer answer is it depends. I can narrow it down a little more. Mostly in those cases where it's slip and fall in winter, it depends on where it happened and how it happened. And the how question is really specifically in Atlantic Canada, and I think I spoke with Crystal about this last time, the big takeaway from court decisions is that people should expect snow and slippery conditions. And it's a question of, did the person, if it's another property owner that whose property you're on, or a city sidewalk, for example, did they know that the conditions were bad? Should they known that the conditions were bad? And did they have a kind of what we call a system of maintenance and inspection in place to prevent what actually happened? And usually that can be determinative of the issue.
Right. If it's a business or a city sidewalk, unshoveled, that type of thing, what happens?
Yeah. For a property owner, if you're on someone else's property and if it's not shoveled, it's been several weeks, it's near a storefront, for example,
right,
that is a much easier case to make out than a city sidewalk. The reason why is that even though normally the legal principles should be the same, cities are usually pretty influential when provincial governments are drafting laws, and there are special protections in place for cities. And the standard normally, and it depends on where you are, is one of what they call gross negligence. Right. So it's not just you should have known that these conditions were present and you should have a system in place, but also it has the extra step of being much more fault-based than what a property owner might be exposed to.
Right, of course. Okay, what about how often you're seeing these slip and fall cases?
Quite often. I mean, Atlantic Canada in the winter is not immune, to say the least, from these kinds of conditions, and we get calls constantly. We'll get calls from people that slip in their own driveways. So, I mean, the question of whether or not there's liability there, that's always very live on a slip and fall. And the real question, again, is where did it happen and how did it happen?
Yeah.
And in many cases, there's just very clear liability. In others, it's much more difficult. And so it's best, if you're in that position, to speak to a lawyer, get a brief consultation before you decide what your next steps are.
Right, of course. Okay, we'll pivot to driving here.
Sure.
If you're driving and you don't have winter tires and you get into an accident, what about that type of situation?
So that happens a lot.
Okay.
Where someone will be at a red light, for example, and they'll get rear-ended by someone. They happen not to have winter tires on. In that kind of case, it shouldn't really make a difference that you don't have winter tires on if you were rear-ended and it had nothing to do with what took place. If it's not a rear-end collision and there's more of an open question of whether you should have been able to brake on time, for example, and the fact that you didn't have winter tires, and you should have winter tires, has something to do with it, then the defense might say, well, our guy's at fault, but you have some liability that you have to wear on your end, and it can reduce what you're entitled to. But that's always, again, an open question in the winter in Atlantic Canada.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, ever-changing conditions out there as well, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Aidan. We'll leave
Thank
it
you.
at that. Of
Yes,
course, we'll, that was our partners from Mike Murphy Law Group, and we've put the link to their website on ours. Now, a reminder that the information provided in this segment is of the general nature and is provided for information purposes only. It does not constitute professional legal advice. Please contact a lawyer before making any legal decisions.